Ladies and gentlemen, quickly moving forward to the next topic of discussion. How do you tap technology to help non-urban areas prosper economically? Now, with the advent of the new age, digital era and technology, this is a very pressing topic, and I'm sure our panelists will shed a lot of light on this.
So I'll quickly begin by introducing myself. My name is Meghdut Roy Chowdhury, the Director of Global Operations at Techno India Group and Techno India University, which is a rather large educational organization in the eastern part of India. And I'll get straight to the point. Before anything else, what I'd like to talk about is the essential urban-rural divide in India. Very soon, 40% of the country is going to be living in urban areas, while 60% of the country still continues to live in rural areas. And we cannot be sitting in urban areas trying to help people in rural areas deal with their problems using our own technology. That cannot possibly be the only way to solve problems. We have to help them help their own problems. That's the way that I would like to begin tackling the topic that we have of today. And I think that essentially the topic for today has, restricting it only to the use of technology is not essentially correct. The way that I would have liked to tackle it is also introducing the concept of the 3 E's, your empowerment, your entrepreneurship, and your education. See, at the end of the day, technology is only a tool. It is a very scalable tool, nonetheless, no doubt about that. But unless you're helping people solve their own problems, no matter how much technology you try to push, it's not going to solve a problem. Let's take the example of what Dr. Yunus did in Bangladesh, wherein he helped empower almost 9 million women currently, open their own companies or start cooperatives or just become self-empowered. What he was doing in the process is reducing the dependency on, let's say, clearinghouses or banks or wherever people would have to go, wherein they would not have any dependency on the rural sector. Now, the way that I would see it is, what is a necessity right now? Equal development of both the rural and urban areas. Why? First of all, prevent urban sprawling. Like cities are growing really big, overcrowding cities, migration of people from villages to the cities. And why? Because jobs. Jobs are better in the urban areas. That's why obviously people want to move from the rural areas to the urban areas. Now, how do you solve this problem? And the main problem also lies in the fact that the more people move from rural areas to urban areas, you're depleting essential agricultural resources which could have been put to use in those rural areas. You have to help develop those communities. Now, how do you do that? Using scalable technologies, which is only a tool, as I said. Now, technology can be essentially used in 2 ways, or as far as I would like to think of it. So first is education. It's an education transmitter from the urban to the rural areas. Take the example. So I was at a conference which was being where our principal secretary for the MHRD, Mr. Anil Swarup, was there, and he was talking about how he started off working in the coal sector, but moved on to education. And he gave an example, a very pertinent example, about this school teacher in a village in Maharashtra who had found a way. So this school that he was teaching at did not have internet access inside the school. So what he did was he created a small batch of students, which was about 25, 30 students, took them to a local cyber cafe and showed them YouTube videos of interesting topics and TED Talks in order to help them understand what was happening in the world. Now, he was acting as a catalyst, using the tool of technology to help promote education and entrepreneurship and newer thinking, newer ideas amongst people in these rural areas. That is the way that you are transmitting essentially education from the urban sector to the rural sector. That's a very commendable approach. On the other hand, what could also be done is, and which is already being done, I'm not saying that we're not working towards it, is that the use of technology as a local action lever in rural areas themselves. Now, there is a very interesting TED Talk that I saw recently. It was in a TEDx talk from India, and this young lady, Ms. Prakulpa Shankar, I believe her name was. So she has this company called Microcups. And what she was working with is essentially deals with data analytics and big data, and using that big data in the rural sector to kind of try and understand what are the needs of the rural sector itself. Now, you have your resources on one side, you might have them, and then you have the local communities which might actually need the resources, but there's no way to bridge the gap. Using technology, what she has succeeded in doing is help get these people, say for example, funding for for starting small businesses, or getting just the basic data, basic education to these very, very remote families, where maybe there's like a little village or a little taluka with like 3 or 4 families. Therein, you have to help them solve their own problems. You cannot be forcing them onto that. Now, what she's been able to do is tremendous. She's mapped the entire state of Maharashtra, and she's brought all of those. She's connected every single dot, every single village, taluka, panchayat, and collected enough data to connect the internal and external stakeholders on the side of the government and as well as the end users. So that's another way that you can use technology. Now, coming to something that you spoke about, you were talking about how iBono, right, the company that you were saying, has come up with a way to use technology in the rural sector. I mean, we are talking of something that Amul did back in 1996. You had AMCUS, you had the automatic milk collection systems, which reduced the time of local milk producers to get their payments by more than half. Now, technology is being used. It's not that, it's just a recent thing. It's not a buzzword. It's been there for a long, long time. What we need to do is, as an urban, as the privileged, we are, at the end of the day, all of us who are sitting here in this room are very, very privileged people. We have education on our sides. We have, we have seen the world, some of us, where most of us, you get to come to a conference like this, mingle with people of that stature. Think about all those who cannot. How do you reach out to those people? Even 1% of all these ideas, if you can reach out to those people, you've already done your job. Now, coming to who I am, I didn't really end up introducing myself. So I'm a computer engineer, primarily. Did my education in West Bengal. Then I realized I was much better with people than I was with code. So I decided to pursue management business. I did my master's in management from 3 different countries. So my home school was HEC Paris. Then I did an international honors program at Stanford University. And then I finished my education, my master's formal education in Israel. And I was working on, my master's thesis was on how do you use frugal innovation, which is Jugaad. How can you not have frugal innovation? How can you not talk about frugal innovation in a conference like this? So I had to bring that up, how do you use frugal innovation on one side and open innovation, say for example, corporate startup engagement, big companies working with small companies to solve each other's problems. What are the problems of big companies? They're slow, they're not flexible, which are exactly the strengths of smaller companies. Why don't they work together to kind of create mass innovation? That's what I wrote my thesis about. And how do you create mass innovation using these two in a resource-constrained economy? Wrote that over 3 primary industries, which was firstly in the food and beverage industry, Amul, that's how. Yeah. Secondly, in the healthcare industry, with Narayana Healthcare, with what Dr. Devi Shetty has done, a tremendous job, working with local entrepreneurs, be it for collecting scrubs or getting local entrepreneurs to come and set up dialysis centers in their premises. And then the third being the company that I represent today, Techno India Group, which was a company that was started by my father. Shouldn't be calling it a company, it's a group, it's an educational conglomerate which was started by my father 35 years ago. And so I come from education. I was born, since I was 5 years old, I think I've traveled with my father, meeting different educationists, talking about policy, learning something along the way. And in terms of initiatives that we've been working on, it was very relevant. It was a little bit of a cosmic affair when I got the invite. And I had gotten the invite before, but when I got the topic for the invite, and we said that we're going to be dealing with development in non-urban areas, very interestingly, from the 15th of January, we started something called the Ishan, which is a rural hackathon drive, and we're working with the IECSME, which is the Indo-European Council for Small and Medium Industries, supported by by AICTE, and working under the SAGI initiative, which is the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana, which was declared by the PM. And what we've done is essentially mapped 1,481 villages across the country and and these villages are all villages which have been adopted by the various members of parliament. Now, they have the resources, but they do not know what are the problems, essentially, that they could solve. So as implementation partners, we come in. I also run an incubation center for students in West Bengal and a co-working space, and trying to build that ecosystem from scratch. So what we are trying to do is we're working with all these villages and about 700 institutions under the tutelage of AICTE, around 35 constituent states, trying to understand what their problems are, so we can actually help them solve them, rather than making it a push approach of telling them, okay, these are your problems, this is what you solve. Rather than we ask them what their problems are, let them come up, and it's a 15-day event that we started. It's going on until the 31st of January, and we want to really help to get into the grassroots level, understand what their problems are, and then help them solve them through the initiatives of the various stakeholders. So basically get them all on the same platform. And I don't know how that is going to pan out. It's something that's just started, and I'm very hopeful about it. And to conclude this part of the discussion, so you said something about this guy, this small community of people who have completely shunned technology, and they're very happy, right? On the other hand, you have these two people who, someone who created the like button and someone who created the refresh scroll on Twitter, how they've also shunned technology. So you started off the discussion on a very positive note, while also a very negative note, the dichotomy. The dichotomy that every single millennial, I think, we suffer from. I don't know how many of you have seen Black Mirror. If you've heard of this show on Netflix called Black Mirror, it talks about a very near dystopian future, something that's very relatable. Let's say, for example, this app that exists which rates people, right? So you have a very ominous tone which goes da 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 da. Every single time you meet someone on the road, you go like, hey, how are you doing? You try to bring out your absolute best. You try to come up with the sweetest thing that you could say to them in the morning, just for that one rating, wherein every single citizen of that country becomes like an Uber driver. And that's the dystopian future we're talking about. That's not the scary part, though. The scary part is, 2 months ago, I was in China, and I was part of a conference very similar to this. It was focused on technology, and the Chinese government is actually trying to implement a system like that for its entire country, for a country of 1.4 billion people, wherein you would be able to rate other people. So that's where the scary part lies, because these shows that we've been seeing, that we're observing, is slowly becoming reality. And you began that. There is no question. There is no answer to that question. I don't know how to answer that question, but that dichotomy will always, I think, up until we see what comes next, continue existing, and we just have to deal with that, try and do good work. So let's see what happens. Right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Meghdut. So, coming back to you, Meghdut, the whole idea of the urban-rural divide and the population from the rural areas migrating to urban areas, it's been extremely popular to see a lot of the drivers in Uber, especially in Bangalore, coming from nearby areas in Bangalore, the villages, right? And every time I talk to them, what they say is, oh my God, my village life was so awesome. Now I'm coming to a city and I'm barely making 15, 20,000 a month. I'm only going to stay in the city for 4 years, and I'm going to own the car and then go back to my town and then get married. In my village, I get fresh air, fresh water, but here I spend 5,000, 10,000 just for a small room which I share with 4 or 5 people, and it stinks in Bangalore, right? And then these people all go back. A great example of crowdfunding that's happened is with Kiva. And we don't have a lot of Indian stories coming around in this manner, where a lot of the urban people possibly see rural people struggling. And there is technologies like crowdfunding platform which can enable them to actually support some of these, the people on the other side of the divide. Right? From a pure social angle, do you see a change happening where actually people like us sitting in the crowd are not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it, right? Or, is it going to stop at a conference where we discuss about it and will it progress further? From your perspective, because you've been seeing Black Mirror and you've been seeing the edge of what it can happen, right? Is really something happening on the ground from your perspective?
So there's a lot happening. That's the only thing I can say, is that there's a lot happening, and the reason to bring it out of the conferences and into the mud is the reason why we started the Rural Hackathon as well. Some very interesting things have come up since we started that. So we put an ad out on the paper that we were inviting corporates who had not CSR projects. That's not what we were looking for. What we were looking for is essentially something like what Danone did with Grameen Bank. So Danone is the biggest yogurt producer in France. What they did was they teamed up with the Grameen Bank team in Bangladesh to create yogurt at a very cheap price for people in Bangladesh, right? That was not a CSR project. That was a project wherein they genuinely cared about a social business and came out with a solution for it. Now, when we gave this ad in the paper that we would like to invite partners to come join hands and help people scale their social businesses, try to make them more sustainable, find solutions for their problems, one of the big revelations was somebody that we'd been working with before, which was Shrey Group. Shrey is you probably know what Shrey Group is. So they have a wing which is called Sahaj. And Sahaj has been working with about 75,000 villages across the country, trying to provide solutions to people's problems through what they call these really empowered individuals in villages called Sahaj Mitra. And there are, you would not believe this, when I heard it, there are 30 crore Sahaj Mitra all across the world. What is it? It's very simple, the idea. What they've done is, in all these 75,000 villages, they've either tied up with local schools, colleges, or set up small marketing centers, wherein they are helping these people get access to funds. One, to helping women in those villages get very basic coding knowledge. So what they're doing is sending one or two people from the closest city, sending them to these villages to do like coding boot camps for villages, especially women in those cities. And what they're doing is they're trying to come up with their own solutions to their problems. And when it's very disheartening to hear that nothing's happening. Are kuch nahi ho raha hai to karo. Somebody has to do it. You cannot be continuously blaming the government for not doing anything. You cannot be continuously blaming people for not doing anything. So something in the last session as well, something that came up, that we were talking about stakeholders in education, which were the university, and you had the government. No one was talking about people who could potentially come up with, say, a course like what Udacity or Pluralsight is doing. They came into India with 1 lakh jobs, nano degrees. They're working with with industry leaders, finding out what are the requirements in these industries and feeding in students directly from there. That's like a 3-month program, 4-month program, 1-year program. That could have happened right in India. I don't know what was the NSDC or the ICT, was the UGC, were these people actually supporting these local entrepreneurs to come and solve their own problems in their own country? Why did 2 major companies, startups from other countries which are barely 3-4 years old, they came and they're providing 1 lakh jobs to people in India? Great, but we could have solved that own problem. Instead of relying on the traditional stakeholders, instead of relying on governments, funding, and on your universities and colleges, why not also support people who see a problem and try to find a solution for it? So hopefully it will not be a disheartening future, and hopefully we'll all be able to work together towards a brighter tomorrow, and that's all I can say.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was a really invigorating session. We thoroughly enjoyed it. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our panelists. I think we heard both sides of the coin. Mr. Prabhu Javla, if you will do the honors and present mementos to our speakers. As they do that, we did learn that technology can be used to create urban opportunities in rural areas, but sustainability is an important factor that one should focus upon. And of course, success in one region is essential before scaling up. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we walk the talk, but it is time to walk the walk. Ladies and gentlemen, a nice strong round of applause as we say thank you to our chairperson, Sanjay Vijayakumar, Ms. Hemalatha Annamalai, Dr. Bhaskar Ramamurthi, and Mr. Meghdut Roy Chowdhury. A quick group photo opportunity.